Welcome to the Good Day at Work podcast. I'm your host, Matt Liggins, and in this episode, we'll be exploring the nuances of workplace wellbeing with help from leaders and experts in helping to create good days at work. So, what makes a good day at work? Let's find out. Hello and welcome to the Robertson Cooper Good Day at Work podcast. I'm really pleased today to be speaking to a former colleague of mine we've worked with before, Claire McLean from Realise HR. We're going to be talking about some of the emerging and ongoing HR trends across the year and how those things tie in together with the wellbeing agenda. So Claire, thank you very much for joining us. You can give yourself a much better intro than I can. So would you like to introduce yourself properly and tell us a bit about you and your background?
Yeah, so Claire McLean, I'm the CEO founder at Realise HR. I've been in HR and working in the HR profession for about 25 years this year. And started in a very corporate world in banking, and then worked across different industries, including manufacturing, pharmaceutical, retail industries and civil engineering. And 8 years ago, I set up Realise HR as a multidisciplinary HR consultancy.
Awesome. Good stuff. And as I say, you've had the misfortune of working with me before, so it's always lovely to kind of catch up with you, and thank you again for joining us.
Pleasure is mine, Matt.
Absolutely. So tell us a bit about Realise then, and I'm going to do a bit of thunder stealing here as well, but sort of the award-winning Realise HR last year.
Yes, award-winning. Thank you. Yeah, so Realise HR, born 8 years ago, like I said. We're a HR consultancy that delivers services for businesses of all different sizes, really. So we've got the micro tech startup businesses that we work with that might have 1 to 5 employees, right up to delivering projects for global PLCs. And what we do is we very much focus on business performance, business growth, and how the people agenda can really support the ambitions of the business. So when it comes to the smaller organisations, we're typically ensuring that they have compliance in place and they've got the end of a phone support when they need it to recruit their first people, support the embedding of their colleagues. And then when we look at the larger scale clients, we very much complement the HR teams, the existing HR teams that they have there, and work alongside them to help them deliver their people agendas, really. And that could cut across anything in the kind of HR spectrum. So from employee engagement to culture development, reorganisation, change, transformation, leadership and management development. So there's a team of 10 of us here at Realise HR. We've all got our specialisms, if you like. My personal love is employee engagement and people experience. And we've got a boutique recruitment arm to the business as well, where we support businesses to spot talent in the HR and executive space.
Really excellent to have you and kind of get your experience and your take on sort of some of the HR trends coming up and how that ties in with that kind of well-being space as well, and how we can perhaps point some of our listeners in the right direction and kind of get them thinking about some of those trends. So what HR trends are you expecting to see businesses adopting this year, or what is very much on the agenda at the moment as the hot topics where you're kind of getting lots of asks for support and things like that?
Yeah, so this year, funny enough, I was looking back at the last 5 years worth of trends according to Gartner, and isn't it interesting that the last 3 years leadership and management development has been one of the top priorities for HR leaders and businesses across the world. And there's no surprise really when you think of the changing political, socio-economic landscape on the back of COVID, that actually the world of managing and leading people is really complex, and supporting managers and leaders to lead and manage effectively, all in the scope of business growth and high performance business needs, then there's no surprise that that's a continuing cycle, if you like. So we're definitely seeing that. We have an ILM level 5 approved manager program. We do a lot of leadership coaching and development programs for organizations. And what we're seeing in that space is that they really want their managers and leaders to be able to connect on a human level with their colleagues. And whilst that might sound quite simplistic in itself, actually, there's a lot of people that, due to, personality preferences, where that might come easier for some other than others. So really helping people connect in that space. So that's a big big topic for 2025 again this year. But I would say there's a bigger focus on that human connection this year from listening to our clients and their needs when it comes to their leaders in particular. Another topic that's been around for a couple of years as well is culture development. So really interesting that only 1 in 4 people across the world actually understand how the values of organisations fit with the culture and what it means to them. So it's really quite low if you think about it. You know, we've been talking about values for a long time, and we know that it goes far beyond putting them up on a wall and making them all shiny and fancy, and there's a lot of work to do in that space. But I was really surprised at that 1 in 4 stat from Gartner. I thought it might have been slightly higher than that, but just shows that we've got a bit of a way to go in terms of connecting people to the ultimate behaviours and values and what it means to them in the workplace. So there's a couple of things on the agenda.
Do you think actually those two things, that real kind of leadership development and that sort of connecting with people, and then the culture themselves, are those two things really tied together? Is that perhaps why we're not identifying with those values and that culture that we'd like, maybe if there's still work to be done with leaders and managers themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So we talk quite a lot with clients when we're doing leadership and development, team development programs. You know, what are your values? It starts with that. You know, what are the behaviours that you're looking to see within organisations, and how can people and managers connect and have conversations, really good conversations about those? So absolutely, it's intrinsically connected. And I think what we maybe struggle, and I say we here, is what we maybe struggle with doing is taking that maybe slightly corporate language, or the language that is there to describe values, and how do we make sure that that is translated, I suppose, for people in their jobs, in their day-to-day jobs? You know, they're coming in on a Monday morning. Well, how does that translate to my job and how I behave and how I interact with my colleagues, my manager, external stakeholders, customers? And I think it's more about bringing it to life, and that's why that leadership development requirements that are coming through and the focus that on that is coming through in terms of that human connection. And it's literally about what words do I actually use as a manager and a leader to explain things to colleagues in a really simplistic but impactful and meaningful way.
So we've talked then about sort of leaders and sort of managers and sort of their impact in the language they're using and sort of how that translates into culture, and those being real emerging sort of trends and sort of consistent topics over the last sort of 12, 18 months and beyond. Is there anything else that you think has sort of, with your kind of expert HR hat on, that actually maybe workplaces ought to be focusing on as well as those things? Anything maybe that's kind of getting missed, or anything you see as a consistent challenge that you'd love to be higher up the agenda in that HR and wellbeing space?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. So one is workforce planning. Blimey, I've been doing HR for 25 years, and it's a really tricky thing to crack. And because typically we would look at maybe the year ahead, 12 months ahead, very transactional workforce planning, i.e. headcount needs. But as we know, workforce planning goes so much further than that in terms of looking at succession plans, looking at the future talent, how they're coming through the organisation, what the needs of the future are going to be in that workforce plan, and how we support people coming through the organisation, and also looking at next generations and what their wants and needs are going to be, or what they are today, which is different to maybe what they were yesterday. So that workforce planning bit can sometimes be quite operational, but actually if we take it to a very, very strategic level, there is quite a lot of work to be done in that, and it requires time and effort and resource to really get all the heads of the business round the table to focus on it. And I think from talking to HR colleagues around different organisations, it's one thing that sometimes just gets put on the back burner, basically. It's like it's on the to-do list, but actually, do we have enough time to talk about it and really get some momentum behind it to create a very well thought through, aligned strategic workforce plan aligned to the business? And what that would do, I mean, it really does unlock a lot of opportunities for colleagues. Knowing where they're going to go, looking at career pathways, actually looking at the development opportunities that they'll have within an organisation. And as we know, those are really big ticket items when it comes to retention of colleagues. So in some ways, the focus is required to be able to retain great talent within their businesses. As we know, retention of talent and attraction of talent is also a key challenge. It's a real challenge within a lot of organisations, across many organisations and many industries. It's a key challenge. So anything we can do to help with that retention is going to help. And I think from a health and wellbeing point of view as well, that what's in it for me? How am I going to develop? How am I going to have meaningful conversations with my line manager to help my career develop? And that's where the well-being comes in, right? Having those meaningful conversations, human connections, where we can support people with career pathways and development pathways that are personalised to them, to their wants and needs, and that help them perform at their best and help them thrive. So I would say that's definitely another key area that I see is going to require some thinking, some time, and some resource put behind it.
Really interesting. And I think that ties in, and sort of you and I have always talked about how sort of those perhaps more traditional, if that's the right word, HR agendas and topics kind of dovetail and sit alongside those sort of the well-being sort of topics and those things you view through a well-being lens, and how they always dovetail. And I think I very much kind of echo your comments around that proactive sort of strategic approach to workforce planning. We're kind of seeing the same sort of things from Robertson Cooper's approach in terms of the well-being agenda kind of coming for this year as well. We're always very much trying to support organizations to take that strategic proactive approach. And again, as you were kind of saying with some of the stats there, the research related through sort of very specific well-being topics, which often is measured by some of the same measures you were talking about in terms of sort of staff attrition and attraction and those kind of areas, taking that strategic, almost sort of needs-led approach and kind of personalizing your approach for your people, very much kind of putting in a well-being agenda that supports the actual people you've got in the business, as opposed to just what the trends might be. You get a far greater return on investment on that, because actually people tend to be a little bit healthier and happier, and then they're able to kind of do a better job at work. So those things tie together so easily, don't they? And that's very much we're starting to get there. We are kind of starting to see that trend, I think, from a well-being space. Actually, it was only the last 12, 18 months, we've seen some research that said, actually, you may not always just get a brilliant return on investment if you just throw stuff at the wall and just do some well-being things. Actually, it does need to be a little bit more strategic, a bit more personalized, a bit more proactive. And when it is, it works far better. So I think, again, if we can kind of suggest as well, to go alongside some of your topics from a Robertson Cooper perspective, that slightly more strategic needs-led approach based on your data, based on your actual people and what they really want, you're going to get those returns on investment. I think then, again, sort of, if we can get kind of the HR communities and the wellbeing communities working together in those spaces, that's then really we can impact that culture. And as you say, sort of line managers and leaders are a key part of that. It'd be really interesting to get your take on actually how you see those two sort of agendas, because as we've always talked about, and as I've mentioned, we've worked together alongside each other as kind of HR and wellbeing leads in organizations. How do you see sort of HR and well-being fitting together? And I guess any examples of where you have seen that working well in organizations?
Yeah, and I think, what works best in my experience is that well-being and the employee experience can go hand in hand, and they're like the golden thread that go through everything that we do. So whilst we may be developing, management development frameworks, performance frameworks, employee engagement frameworks, reward frameworks, so those can sometimes be looked at as singular pillars, if you like. But actually, the employee experience and the well-being of people should cut through all of that. So there should be support from well-being specialists and HR working together to look at, well, as part of that process, where are we going to, what is the experience for the person going through that process, number one, and is it an amazing experience that's really going to engage them? And also, where are the touch points where we can talk about the well-being of that person, right? And what is that doing to impact their performance? What is it doing to impact the business to team performance? How much they're engaged in a business? So I think if we ask ourselves some questions related to well-being and the candidate experience, the employee experience, as we build those frameworks, then I think we've got a much better chance of having a great set of principles and frameworks and processes and procedures that are engaging, that people love to go through rather than dread, and also puts them as a human being right at the centre of that. It also makes it easier for a manager, I think, to have those nice conversations when it's not out of the box, tick box type thing. They want to have nice conversations with their teams. They might want to have some tricky conversations with their teams, but it's okay because it's all in the guide rails and the framework of we're doing it because we want to genuinely improve situations, help the person, so it comes from a place of love, really, doesn't it? So I think working together and having a set of questions just to sense check, have we considered well-being as part of this? Have we considered it through the lens of an employee from an experience point of view? You probably won't go far wrong in that respect if you do that.
Absolutely. Great advice. And I think as well, I'd sort of echo that again, sort of flipping that coin around from sort of how can we kind of, for well-being leads, etc., or programs that are focused on sort of well-being, actually it's having those sort of more systematic structures and processes and procedures that sit behind it that you kind of get from HR experts such as yourself, as opposed to just doing some well-being stuff or just having a well-being calendar that just kind of sits as an extra or as a side of desk.
Yeah.
Very much if you can incorporate well-being into part of those general sort of people management processes and your human resources processes, again, they're going to just feel to far more like a part of the organization and how you do things, as opposed to, right, well, let's do our formal processes here and then let's do a bit of extra well-being over there, because that's always the first bit that's just going to go, or it's just going to seem like a, sort of actually it's going to have the negative, the opposite effect, isn't it, of kind of taking people's time up and causing those issues. So yeah, it's very much around that dovetailing and integrating together. And is there anything else that you suggest might be a bit of a pitfall, or sort of, kind of the kind of common traps that maybe sort of HR and wellbeing agendas, when they are trying to sort of fit together, that sort of should be avoided, or any ways to kind of work around any of those issues?
Yeah, I often get asked by founder-owned businesses or SMEs who are starting on this journey, and they really do believe that investing in colleagues' well-being is important. So that's great, isn't it? And the first thing that they say is like, well, what should we do, Claire? Tell us what we need to be doing. And I was like, you're asking the wrong person, because you should be asking your colleagues what they want, right? So I think the biggest thing that I would say is don't ask a HR person or somebody that you maybe trust in business to give you a plan, a wellbeing plan. It's like, actually listen to your colleagues, go and find out what would be meaningful for them. Yes, you might come back with 100 ideas, but that's okay. And from that, you can then build in some initiatives that they recognise actually was part of that, was part of their kind of idea generation. So ask your colleagues first. I would always say that. Involve them, engage them in that. And the second thing I would say is start off small, because you can always add on. So going in with a massive wellbeing agenda that is complex and a bit overwhelming often then gets treated as wallpaper on a, if you imagine the posters up, it's a bit of wallpaper and actually we don't really read it. Or so I would say start off small, but start off really meaningful. So what are the biggest things that are going to make the biggest impact first? And sometimes it's the smallest thing that make the biggest impact for people. Yeah, I mean, we see a lot of organisations saying, we'll put the fruit out on a Friday. And it's like, well, Johnny brings his own fruit and he's quite happy bringing his own fruit. Johnny might not need that, but actually what Johnny needs a conversation every Friday about how's this week gone, because actually Johnny suffers from some anxiety and has some, so actually Johnny maybe need a conversation to help with his well-being going into the weekend, doesn't need the fruit on the Friday. So it's those types of examples that we try and give to our clients to bring to life how well-being can be done slightly differently and hyper-personalised.
Absolutely. So I think it sounds like maybe to kind of sum up some of the topics that we've been talking about, and both very much sort of in agreement. I think that it's that cultural approach, maybe through managers and leaders, but sort of making sure we're tying together sort of the HR and wellbeing agendas, but to find out what our employees and sort of our colleagues actually sort of want and need. So that needs-led approach, being a bit strategic about it, starting small, and then trying to support the managers and leaders to be able to implement that to create that culture, which all sounds very easy when we say it, but sort of it's that process at least to build around, isn't it? That seems like it's important.
Yeah, and I would add, topics that we see when we're out and about, where we feel that does require some either initiatives or interventions or some some thinking, some real complex situations, is regarding resilience. So what we see when we're giving advice to clients, maybe from an employee relations perspective, when things are maybe getting a little bit tricky and there are some well-being issues, is that we find that colleagues who are supported in building their resilience or understand what that could look like for them is really helpful, and especially when it comes to some of the younger generations as well, in terms of how we help them build their resilience in life. It really supports them in the workplace. So that's something to consider, I think, if you are spotting people who are maybe struggling.
Absolutely. Yeah, and sort of shameless plug for Robertson Cooper. We do lots of support around resilience and lots of support around sort of supporting managers as well, as I'm sure you guys do too. So yeah, it is a key topic we're seeing as well, isn't it? That sort of trying to prevent people getting to that burnout stage, or when they do, helping build people back up, isn't it? Well, excellent stuff. Really interesting to talk to you about some of those sort of things. And sort of, I feel like I've learned a lot this morning, as well as I always do when I work with you, which is, again, another shameless reason for getting you on the podcast. So it's just a bit of upskilling for me this morning, which was very helpful. Lastly, what do you guys do at Realise to look after your own team wellbeing? Any tips or any little bits of advice that you can kind of apply in that SME space?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do quite a lot in the wellbeing space, and again, it's what they want. So everybody gets a wellbeing allowance every year. They can spend that. The rules of the game are you spend it on you. So we've got some colleagues who go for sports massages every month. We've got others that use it on a gym membership. We've got others that use it on a spa day for just relaxation. So very much what you want to use that on. We've also got an app and a wellbeing app that we use through a company called ULife. Bit of a plug for them, but it works wonders for us. It tracks our steps. We get points for it. We can get vouchers off Tesco's shopping and all sorts of things. The more we walk, the more points we get, which is great. There's a little bit of competition in there for people that love a bit of competition. So those are some of the things we do for wellbeing. We also offer 2 days volunteering per year, and that is aligned to what their wants and needs are. They really want to give back to the community. So whatever area they'd like to volunteer in, we've got Helen who goes and volunteers in gardens. Becca is a trained counsellor, therefore she works in that space. Martin's really keen on supporting the next generation, so works with local schools to help them with their career development and identifying what they'd like to do later on in life. So there's some of the things that we do here at Realise. And the one golden rule we have when it comes to physical well-being is do it when it makes sense for you. So for example, I come in early morning, get an hour's work done, then I go to the gym at 9:30. Others go at 3:00. Some go, later on. Whatever works for you in the day. And from a personal point of view, long gone are the days that I can get up at 5:30 to go to the gym for 6:00. So it has to be integrated into my work, right? So that's a key thing for us here. We empower them to do what works for them.
Again, coming back to that person-centered approach, isn't it? Letting people decide on sort of what they're going to do in terms of their time and their budget and sharing those resources. So it's fantastic. Sounds like lots of brilliant initiatives as well, which I'm sure why you look so healthy and happy this morning. Good stuff. And of course, then it tracked back into the results as well, sort of with your award win. So yeah, it shows you again another case in point of sort of investing in sort of your people's well-being, and you kind of get the success. So it has been a pleasure to speak to you again, and always lovely to catch up. Thank you very much for all your insight this morning. I think that's probably enough waffle from you and I. And I'll hopefully sort of see some of our listeners on our next podcast with our next guest coming up soon. But thank you very much, Claire.
You're absolutely welcome, Matt. Lovely to chat this morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the Good Day at Work podcast, brought to you by Robertson Cooper. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, like, and leave a review. Every time you do, it helps us to promote our podcast and increases the chances of others finding the show too. For further details on Robertson Cooper and how our evidence-based solutions drive tangible improvements in workplace well-being, mental health, and engagement, head over to robertsoncooper.com. See you next time.